Alrighty. Welcome to the 74th episode of the Korea podcast with your host, me, Jack, located in Ulsan, South Korea. Once again, my computer is being wonky today, so what you see is my still image and that handsome lad above me, that's Ryan Estrada. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. Right on. The Hagwon the Korea podcast is a podcast that talks about anything and everything related to living and working in South Korea, and anything else that's happening in and around South Korea. I hope to enlighten people on the running and operating of Hagwons, as well as bring in some guests like Ryan, for example, who live and work in South Korea or have been for some time, and do things other than the traditional stuff that most expats have been doing in the past, which is like teaching English or working as engineers here, particularly in the city of Ulsan. So, Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Yeah. I included your link, the link to your website. It's listed below the podcast here now. So if people who are, let me just check. I don't even know. People who are listening now or after recording, and you would like to check out Ryan's work. Whoa, what? Yeah. Oh, bugger. Okay. Shoot. Okay, we're good. So I posted the link below the video. If you are listening in and you want to follow, check out Ryan's website and his work, you can do so underneath the video. It's there. There is a plethora of things that you've done. So Aki Alliance is the one that you mentioned you wrote. Is that correct? That was
yeah. Someone in chat is saying that you're not getting any audio from me in the video.
It's good now, but
okay.
Crap. See what I mean? There's always stuff happening. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically have been going over the things that Ryan has been doing, traveling around, and the work that he's been doing internationally as well, based out of Korea basically, and we touched upon the art scene in South Korea and Busan in particular. And his work. Ryan Estrada. I'm just looking at your website here. Broken Telephone. What is that about? Can you just like run the synopsis for us here?
Yeah, Broken Telephone was a really fun project, right? I wrote a crime story where every chapter follows the villain of the chapter before it. So in the story, everyone is the hero of their own story and the villain of someone else's. So it's this global crime story where each one happens in another country, but they're blaming what's happening on someone else that in turn is blaming it on someone else, and everyone is trying to do what they think is right, but just causing lots and lots of problems. And I got a different art team to illustrate each chapter, and it just kind of, you follow this crime story and slowly figure out what's happening until it comes full circle.
How do you get your ideas? Like, where do you get your ideas from?
I just constantly have things I want to make comics about. It's never been an issue to come up with ideas. It's been an issue of like, I have a backlog of several hundred comics I want to make. When can I get the time or resources to make this one? It's mostly just, when you move to a new country every year for a decade, and get into as much trouble as I have, you have so many experiences that stories come out of them. Like I mentioned at the beginning of my career, when I was 15 years old, I was making a comic about an orange cat who's too lazy to chase mice, because that was the only experience I had was reading Garfield. But now that I've I've been around the world and been almost eaten by lions and been thrown out of a train and busted ghosts on a Korean persimmon orchard and all these wild experiences. Now I have things to draw upon and just constantly want to make comics about things.
Right. So I started talking about graphic novels, and what drew me to them was my kids. Basically, I got a wind of graphic novels, which this was a new thing to me. Like I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to comics and stuff like that. But so one of the first ones that I got a hold of was novels by Ben Hakte. Zita, the space girl. I'm just wondering, like, because Ben is I don't know, he only published, I guess, 3 or 4 books himself. At least the ones that are big sellers. I assume he probably made a lot more. But in this environment, how close or not close or competitive do things get between, like, yourself and other comic publishers, comic writers?
Basically in comics, everyone, like, no one's competing against one another. There's no like window that if one person's success doesn't mean someone else is going to do poorly. We're all like best friends. Like Ben and I worked together on Flight Comics, which is a series of anthologies that were done like a couple decades ago now. And we all try to be as supportive of one another as possible. I actually have in the next book I have Student Ambassador Missing Dragon, which is a kid's book. There's a hidden mini game where in the book kids can learn to read Korean just as in the process of solving one of the mysteries. And then if they reread the book, they realize that all of the signs in the backgrounds are the titles of children's books. And Zeta the Space Girl is one of those that you can find. And just, me trying to do my part to like promote lots of other artists, because we all want each other to succeed, and we all like working together and collaborating and stuff like that.
Is that the Read Korean in 15 Minutes book?
It's Learn to Read Korean in 15 Minutes is just a short comic that I put online. Oh, okay. But I actually wrote Student Ambassador first a long time ago, but it didn't actually come out until now. Mm-hmm. And but it takes all the things that I put in Learn to Read Korean in 15 Minutes, but adds it to a story. Learn to Read Korean in 15 Minutes is a thing that I did not know was going to be successful. I only drew it because I taught so many people on napkins how to read Hangul that I'm sick of drawing this on napkins. I'm just going to draw it once, and if somebody asks me, I'm going to give them a link. And I didn't even think to put my name on it, and it went so viral that like hundreds of millions of people learned to read Hangul from that comic. And I've put my name on it since, but the version that went viral is not the version with my name on it. And it's apparently so famous that there is a bootleg Learn to Read Korean in 15 Minutes themed restaurant in China. Really? That someone found and sent me pictures of. And I'm like, I need to go there. What's happening?
Give me a piece of the action.
Yeah. I just want to see it.
Yeah. So how did you get started with the radio? How did that come about?
Well, originally I was just, I was the quiet, reserved person who just wrote and drew comics. I was never really a performer. But for a long time I was doing this thing called the Not My Jam Challenge, which is where if I catch myself turning down any opportunity for no reason other than that it's not my jam, I have to do it. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't, like, if something's too expensive or I'm morally opposed to it or I don't have the time, it doesn't mean I have to do everything. But if it's like, that could be interesting, but it's just not the kind of thing I do, I have to do it. And so just by doing that, I started doing, I got invited to do a poetry slam. I did that. And at the poetry slam, someone's like, hey, we need someone to act in Shakespeare. I'm like, I guess I got to do that. And I just started getting involved in lots of these things. And I started, I won the first poetry slam I ever went to. After getting a small part in Shakespeare, like the next year I was hosting the Shakespeare Festival. And these things that I was doing because they were not my style suddenly became me. It's part of my life, is every month doing these types of events. And the radio just kind of grew from that, where there was an opportunity to host some shows. And I'm like, well, I've been on stage, I've been acting, I might as well give it a try. And then that led to like doing audio dramas where I was doing radio and acting and doing and music and all these things. So it mostly just came from finding other ways to tell stories. I love telling stories in comic form. I love telling stories in radio form. And that's BEFM is our local city-run English radio station, and I do a lot of just guest segments, just talking about travel or talking about this week in history. But this season, I got promoted to be the producer of the BEFM drama, and I'm actually producing radio drama for them. And so it's just a nice, fun gig.
Nice. Yes, good. I was just listening to you, trying not to think about the questions that I wanted to come up with. So I guess you just mentioned you've also been doing acting, right?
Yeah.
And that's,
okay.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I've now at this point now acting has kind of become like what drawing comics is for me. Like my main thing is I love writing and developing stories, but I draw a lot of comics just because that's something I have to do to show other people the stories that are in my head. But luckily, I've been lucky enough to be able to hire a lot of other artists that bring a lot more to the stories. And now acting is something I was doing. It's really fun to do. But like with the audio drama, now I'm kind of getting a crash course in acting because the budget's not big enough to hire that many actors. So like I have my two main actors that play the leads in the show, and then just like any character they come across, I have to play. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those characters have arguments with one another. So I have to and I've done like about 30 episodes now, so I have to come up with like 4 new voices every episode, and and also be careful with it. Like I don't want to I can't play any offensive voice. I don't want to play another culture's voice. So it's just like trying to come up with characters and trying to make them all interesting. So I'm getting this crash course in acting, but I've done a bit of acting is just another thing that I do just because it gives me the chance to take part in fun, creative things. I got to act in a Bollywood movie once, one of the worst movies ever made. I got to play a zombie in a like horror comedy once. It's not my main thing, and I wouldn't call myself great at it, but it's a thing that I enjoy playing around with.
Yeah, sure. Acting, I've never done acting. I've done just backstage or support. What is it? The people in the background. I've done a little bit of that in Canada and some of it in Korea, and I always enjoyed it. If I had stuck around in Canada for a little bit longer, maybe I would have wet my feet somewhat more in the acting industry, because I did enjoy it. I was in Vancouver in Canada doing my BA at the University of Simon Fraser, and Vancouver in Canada is pretty well known for its movie industry. There's a lot of companies coming in from the States, or at least in the past they used to come in, because the cost of production was a lot cheaper in Canada, I think, than it was in the States. And so a lot of companies used to come into Vancouver, so there was a lot of extra work on stage. And so a lot of students, like university students, would get hired because the lull between the scenes was often several hours long. So you could go and do your homework or study for 2 or 3 hours and go out on the stage for a couple of minutes, do your thing, and then get back to the waiting room and do some more studying. So that was quite cool.
Yeah, for me, my first theatrically released role, as I said, one of the worst movies I ever made. It was a Bollywood movie called Aapka Surur, the movie, The Real Love Story. Movie is spelled with 2 E's, love is spelled with a U. And it's such a bad movie that I was living in India, and none of my friends and my girlfriend at the time, who loved Bollywood movies, would not go see it with me. And I'm like, but I'm in it. And basically, they shot the entire movie shot the whole movie in Germany, but they didn't have microphones there for some reason, and they dubbed the entire movie. And since it took place in Germany, there are a lot of foreigner actors, so they just brought in any foreigner they could find on the street. and they sat us in a room while someone fast forwarded through the movie, and if they saw a foreigner talking, they'd stop and be like, "Who wants to play this guy?"
Yeah.
And like there was so little care into it that like there are characters that appear throughout the movie, but every time they appear, they're voiced by a different actor from a different country. And I did a few little bit parts, but my main role was as a police officer. And there's a scene where they show me the scene, and I'm like, okay, that's great, I'll do it. You have a script? They're like, oh, there's no script. The line is, what the hell? Okay. And I'm like, okay, that's great. He talks for 3 minutes. And they're like, yeah, just say what the hell. And I'm like, so should I improvise? Like, no, you're not allowed to improvise. You say what the hell. And I'm like, for 3 minutes? They're like, yeah. So as like to illustrate how bad an idea that was, they just played the film, and I went, what the hell? What the hell? What the hell is going on here? What the hell? What the hell are you doing? And they'd stop, and I'd give them this look like, see, that didn't work. And they're like, next, and it's in the movie. It's so bad. Luckily, like, they fade in and out, and, like, there's other people talking, so, like, you don't just hear me doing that for 3 minutes, but it's, right. Yeah. So that was my first foray into acting. So, like, after that, it kind of took away all the pressure of acting, because it's not like, it's not like this, if my first part was, like, up in some, like, amazing film and I'm trying to do it justice, then, like, after I would have had this feeling in my guts of, like, I have to do well, but now I'm like, I survived that, I'm fine, I'll do my best. If it doesn't work, they'll cut me out. And since acting isn't what I'm passionate about, like, I'm not, like, precious about, like, I hope I'm good enough, like, if it helps the story, I'll be in it. If not, cut me out, whatever.
Right. So your bread and butter pretty much remains in the drawing and the comic world, basically, right?
Yeah.
A post that you threw up on that you posted on Facebook a couple of days ago says that you've fallen into the realm of where Hollywood folks are constantly messaging you, asking about if they can use some of your material for film and TV adaptations. And you said that you can't talk about everything, but what are some things that you could mention? Because that's kind of exciting, right? Like, that's, I think, a lot of people's, I don't know, dream of, of having Hollywood or any big production company knocking on their door and asking them to lend their hands in producing, something bigger with the stuff that these creators made.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I've been making stuff for decades, and just I have this huge backlog of stuff that I thought, like, and I never thought, I'm making this stuff because it's weird personal stuff that just I make it myself, put it online, and I never thought that anyone would ever want to make a movie of it. But then suddenly to get emails that's like, we think this would make a good movie, and it, like I mentioned in the post, like some of it's legit, some of it, like, it's just, my favorite ones are the ones where they, like, email me and they're like, this project, I think it'd be great. This is gonna be a hit, make a perfect movie. I love every part of it. And then, like, 5 emails in, they're like, by the way, can you send me a free copy so I can read it? And I'm like, so you haven't read it? You don't know what it is? So, like, it's weird with Hollywood. Like, there's some stuff that, like, a lot of people, there's producers out there that are just trying to grab up stuff that they think one day might be popular, right. Not because they want to make it, but because if someone else wants to make it later, they want to have the rights so that they get paid. Yeah, okay. So they pay, like, a little bit while it's before the iron is hot. So there's some of that, and there's also, there is stuff that I've signed for, like, big companies that are in the works, but like I said, it's hugely exciting and, like, validating of your entire thing, especially when it's something that that you worked on a long time ago, and you like weren't sure if anyone was ever going to want to read it, and it just kind of so validating that some big company that you grew up on wants to make something out of it. But even still, then it's such a long process of, like, years and years before you even get a contract to sign. You get the contract, then it's like, we're going to make a pilot. That's going to take a couple of years, and who knows, maybe one day, 30 years after you made the comic, something might come of it. But it's just, like, for me right now, it's nice like a series of compliments. Mm-hmm. I'm happy with that. If a show comes out of it, sure, that'd be nice too.
But it will take some time, as you mentioned.
It will.
Yeah.
It will.
Things always do. I just keep scrolling through your Facebook feed, and I found the post a couple of weeks ago. For those listening in, a couple of weeks ago, I read a post that Ryan put out on Facebook that was relating to one of his, I guess, caricatures, one of his comic strips that he made for, who was that commissioned for?
The Nib.
The Nib.
Political site.
Okay. And so Ryan received a bunch of messages basically saying, so I'll just read out what you said. People have been messaging me because a guy I drew in a comic, So Mayor Park Won-soon, went missing yesterday and was just found dead. And so 2 weeks ago, this kind of brought me to the point of wanting to make a podcast about sexual harassment, and I asked Ryan to come on the podcast then, but unfortunately he wasn't available, and he said, let's do it in a couple of weeks' time. But since I already kind of committed myself to talking about it, I did a little bit, but I just wanted to go back to that topic today, and just, I don't know, hear what you had to add to it. So I guess, without overstepping boundaries and not getting ourselves in trouble here.
Yeah, well, I mean, what struck me is just that, the way the laws are set up, that is, I don't know what happened in the situation, but the way that laws are set up in Korea are really not good at protecting victims of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and things like that. And I don't pretend to be an expert in the law or women's issues, and it's very difficult to be an expert in that, because the issue is the laws are so vaguely worded purposely so that they can be applied to whoever the people in power want to apply them to. Just in the way that people can be sued for libel even if they're saying something that's true. And especially if someone has just died, there's a whole thing of like, are you desecrating their memory by mentioning these things and ruining their reputation? And I thought that for someone to come out against the mayor like that, even in any situation, the effect on a woman coming forward with something like that is devastating and terrible, and you wouldn't want to go through that unless it was something that you truly believed in and wanted to get out there. And to do something in a situation like this where there's so much against her, I think that woman is very brave, and especially even coming out after he's gone and telling her story. But yeah, it's just, and then also, of course, the thing where they mention that, I guess in Korea, if they're investigating someone for sexual crimes like that, and then they die, the police have to stop the investigation and throw away their research because they're no longer pursuing it. And then if there's no longer a record, then there's nothing to protect. That if there's a police report and a police investigation, that protects the person that's talking about it. And now if that's thrown away, that person's rights are, they no longer have that legal backup to protect them from speaking the truth. And I just think that's kind of sad that that's the way it works here. And I hope that a lot of things change. Even beyond the realm of victims of sexual violence, I just think it's really weird that Chun Doo-hwan, the guy who massacred citizens with helicopters and machine guns and whatnot, the only legal trouble he's gotten into it, he's not in jail, he's a free man. The only time he had to go to court because of it was because he called a priest a jerk for talking about the helicopter guns. And they're like, oh, well, you're desecrating the dead. It's just weird that is the law is so weirdly defined, and in that case, I'm not complaining that a war criminal went to jail. It's just weird that that's the reason that he did it. Not he went to jail, he went to court. It's just the reason that's the way he did it, and that those same laws are used unfortunately, in most cases, they're affecting women and victims of sexual violence that can't speak out against what's going on in their lives.
Yeah, yeah. 2 weeks ago, I read a article or a post in relation to this topic about a woman who was basically sexually harassed at a company dinner and by her supervisor, superior, and she came forth with it. She wanted to make place charges, and basically the company told her that if you continue with the charges, you'll be fired from the company. So your choice is to either drop the charges or lose your job. And so because she really wanted to get the job, like this was one of her dream job. She wanted for a long time. She decided to drop the charges, and because she dropped the charges, the company went and twisted that into her admitting to have lied about what happened. And so as a result, she was punished by, I don't know if she was, I don't remember if she was demoted, but she lost, she had a pay cut and something else. But so either way, whatever she did, she would have been screwed, so to say, no pun intended, which really sucks, because that's like, how do you get around that without hurting yourself, right? And still being able to stand up for, protecting yourself.
Yeah, that's very, I mean, it's just victims here, they're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's just not many avenues available for them to follow. Another thing I talked about in that post is kind of the way policing is done in Korea and the way it changed. Because like in the 1980s, the police were known for like being brutal, violent, drag people off the street and take them into a secret, undisclosed location and beat confessions out of them. And so then they tried to do this big reversal where it was like, we're going to reinvent the police. We have this happy little Podori cartoon mascot we're going to put out in front of every police station, like it's Big Boy, and like we're going to be the happy, friendly police.
Right.
And I mean, that's great. Let's get rid of the violence. But then what they did is like, okay, instead of stopping crime, the goal is, let's just get people to like work it out themselves and like not even file police reports. So like if you can basically like if two drunks are fighting on the street, rather than put them both in jail, they'll be like, okay guys, who's at fault? All right, now you apologize to him. Now if you want to ask for a couple bucks for him to drop the charges, you guys can negotiate that. All right, you're good, leave. And someone pays somebody off. But then I mean, that's all well and good if you're just trying to get two rowdy drunks off the street to go home. But then that also applies to victims of sexual violence, where the police are like, okay, well, we could arrest him, but why don't you guys make some kind of a deal here where he pays a couple bucks and you just drop it. And like, if women, like I've heard stories of women who have been in that situation, and then the police are like upset with them for not making a deal, and then like the police will take the person who assaulted them's like wife and children to their hospital room as they're recovering, and like have them crying and being like, how can you do this to our family? Take a deal, and force them to take money to drop the charges. Then of course if they do that, there's no charges, there's no paper trail, they can never talk about it, or they can be sued for libeling someone, like you said with the situation. Dropping it is taken as evidence of lying, even though the police are the ones forcing them, and kind of this kind of emotional torture of bringing family members into their hospital room when they're the victims. It's just kind of sad that there's all these weird ways that the system fails these victims.
Right. So is this something you talk about? I think you mentioned that the book that you're working on touches upon sexual harassment. What is the book?
Yeah, the book that came out recently is Banned Book Club. Okay. That's about my wife's time in the 1980s, growing up in when she went to college, she thought she was joining just a reading group, and it ended up being a banned book club that was like fighting the dictatorship. And it kind of touches on issues there of that, about there's people that are fighting in the revolution, and like the men are taking in and being tortured, and about how that's not what was happening with the women. They if the women were arrested, they had to worry about being assaulted by the police, and there's lots of things like that about the characters being sexually harassed by teachers and things, but how that's not what's being focused on. That the police aren't worried about teachers stalking students. They're worried that you might be reading a Noam Chomsky book when it's not allowed.
Mm. So is this based on, you just mentioned your wife, is this based on a true story then?
Yep, it's her life story. This is a situation I knew nothing about until a few years ago. We've been married for like 7 years. We'd known each other for decades. Mm. And all of a sudden she's just casually like, yeah, so when I got interrogated by the KCIA, and I'm like, wait, when you did what? And then she just, oh yeah, this is a long time ago. And she just brushed it aside. And then I tweeted about it. A publisher saw it, offered us a book deal. And now I uncovered this wild history of my wife and her friend network of fascism fighting nerds.
Very awesome. That book is listed right now on your website. So again, for anybody who's listening, if you're interested, check out Ryan's website. It's listed below the video, and the book is the first one that's listed, posted right on the website.
Yeah. It was released in both English and Korean. If you want to get it in Korean, it's called Bimil Doksa Dongari.
All right. Well, there you go. Is it on Amazon? Like, how can people get a hold of it?
Anywhere you get books. It's everywhere. You got it on Amazon. You got it in local bookstores. You can get it here in Korea. You can order the English version from Kyobo and Yes24, all those guys.
There's a link on Ryan's website, on your website here, so I guess you can just do it through there as well, right?
Yeah.
Indiebound.org. All right, very cool. Okay. What else? I don't know.
I don't know. We can just start the podcast over for the 10 minutes that are gone, and then you can just loop it, go around a circle.
I feel so stupid about that, man. I don't even. I was trying to avoid mentioning that. It's horrible. Very amateur. It's just every single. I was just thinking to myself, I got to make a list of things that I need to check before I even start doing the podcast, because this happens again and again, and there's always something. There's just too many things that I need to take care of, and there's always one that slips kind of through the cracks, and this is not one that I wanted to slip through cracks, man. Yeah, I don't know. The first 10 minutes we talked about, just brief introduction. Ryan came to Korea in 2002, had a crazy slide here on, I was saying in 2002, my friend came here in 2002. Yes. And basically his story went that a recruiter, he found, I guess a recruiter who asked him to come down to South Korea and come check out the World Cup. And basically said, come down for this job. If you like it, you stay. If you don't like it, watch the World Cup, and then you can go back to wherever you came from. And they paid for his flight. They paid for his accommodation and all that jazz. So my friend came, and he ended up staying. Back then, I just had a brief discussion about that just recently. Back then in 2002 and pre-2000, things were very, very different in Korea. There was a lot of horror stories from expats being, exploited by their employers. I know my friend lost a bunch of cash. He wasn't paid for several months, I think. And me, myself, I came to Korea in 2005. I lost a chunk of money on my first job and kind of, wrote it off. But what was your experience like with the first Hagwons? Like, do you have any horror stories to share?
Well, I mean, my first Hagwon was great. I didn't have any issues there. Like you said, that was the early days. That was the desperate days, where it was like if you could send an email, you had a job. Like, right. As I mentioned, I heard about Korea at 3 a.m., had a job by 4 a.m., and then looked at a map to see where Korea was. Right. And then I had a beautiful time at my first Hagwon for a year. And then I guess I'll tell the story again since there's no audio. But The second time I came to Korea was where I had the wild experience. It was maybe a little bit different from other people's wild experiences. But basically what happened was I did my time in Korea. I left and I told my recruiter, like, he's like, you want another job? And I'm like, appreciate it, but I love traveling so much. I want to go somewhere else. I want to travel the world, see everything. And then he called me back and he's like, okay, I know you said you didn't want to come back, but I got this really good job specifically for you. You're a cartoonist, you make books, you write books. The biggest publishing company in Korea, Gimyoung Publishing, they want you to run their English books division. They're going to pay you like $4,000 a month. They're going to get you an apartment. They're going to get you a car. They're going to fly you out here, everything. Only thing is you got to be here by Monday morning at 6 a.m. And I'm like, okay, it's Friday night, which means it's Saturday in Korea. He's like, you got to get on a plane right now. And they were going to reimburse me for my ticket. So I had to borrow, I had to spend every last dime I have and borrow more for literally, I need to leave for Korea right now. And of course I had to get the round trip ticket and get a refund because at that time you needed to show a return ticket. And by 6 a.m. I was in Paju Book City, and then they bring me into this. They take me into this room, and the guy who runs the company, David Kwan, he says, "Please sit in this chair until 6 p.m." 12 hours from now, and I'm like, okay. I just flew from America because I needed 6 minutes. So I sat in the chair for 12 hours, at which point nothing happened.
Right.
And I sat for another 3 hours until it was about 9 o'clock, and the dude comes in to switch the lights off with his jacket over his shoulder, and he's like, "Oh, you're still here? Yeah."
Oh, jeez.
I've been asking around. No one here knows who you are. The guy they say hired you hasn't worked here in months. I don't know what's going on, but we're not hiring, and you got to go. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I kind of walked out homeless and penniless, and I called my agent, and I'm like, okay, so I don't know what's going on, but he's like, oh, no, don't worry, I found the guy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, the guy that hired you, misunderstanding, I took you to the wrong place, he's at another company now. We're going to go there tomorrow, I'll meet you at 6 a.m. So the next time we go to the other side of Seoul, not in the gleaming high rises, but we go to this nasty alley full of garbage. At the back of that is this rusted door that leads to this spiral metal staircase that leads to this tiny sweatshop where they're printing Chinese takeout menus. In the back of that is a closet, and in there is a guy named Jaebom Shin.
Are you serious?
Yes, I'm telling you. This
Twisted rusted stairs in the middle of Seoul.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's I always, when I tell a story, I'm always like, you know how in Korea there's no nasty gross parts? This was the nasty gross part. I found it. And originally I told you the quick version, but now you're getting the whole thing.
Right. So that's even better.
So we go in this closet and there's two giant red leather chairs that are this far apart from each other. And there's this little guy with this comically long cigarette. And he's wearing dark glasses indoors, and he looks almost exactly like Kim Jong-il. And he's just sitting there like this, and the room is just full of cigarette smoke. And he points to the chair for me to sit down, but they're so close that I have to squeeze in his knees are between mine, like a little knee sandwich. And we're just sitting there, and he's talking to my recruiter back and forth in Korean. And I keep being like, what are we talking about? He's like, I don't know. We're just waiting on something. And I'm just sitting there awkwardly for hours. And then finally the agent is like, I don't know what's going on, but we're waiting for something. I got to go. You stay here and see what happens. He walks out. J-Bomb watches him leave, watches the door close, turns to me and says, now we can talk. I'm like, oh, you got secret English. And he's like, this is not new company. Old company, very bad. They fired J-Bomb. David Kwan, very bad man. David Kwan, no good boss. David Kwan, no good English. You know who should be boss of Gimyoung? J-Bomb. That is why I've brought you here. I'm doing a coup, and you are going to help me. And long story short, it came out that he tricked me into flying out there so that I could help him take over the company that had fired him and replace the guy that had fired him. And as soon as that happened, he would be able to pay me. Until then, I could just, volunteer, I guess.
How was he hoping you would help him take over a company in a foreign land without speaking the language, man?
Well, what he wanted me to do was to go to all of their clients and tell them, don't buy Kim Young's books, buy J-Bomb's books. And I'm like, oh, can you show me your books? He's like, no, they're at the old company. I'm not allowed to go there. And I'm like, okay, so you don't have any books? He's like, I've got some ideas. And I'm like, so you want me to just
start drawing
travel around Korea unpaid, telling people to drop the biggest publishing company in Korea and go to a guy they fired that might have a book someday? And I just, he wouldn't let me leave. And I just sat in that room for hours until 5 p.m. I just kind of slowly got up and ran away and never went. And then found myself homeless and penniless in Korea with no job and got stuck there again and spent another year. But I enjoyed it. But I decided, even though I had to go get a Hagwon job, I decided, you know what? I came here to publish books, so I'm going to publish books. So I published a comic book about that guy.
Did you write a story about that, the story that you just told me?
Yeah, I mean, I got to redo it one day because it's a very old book. But yeah, I published a book called Cartoon Coup that was about coming out and being roped into a publishing company coup in Korea.
That's awesome. That'll be a pretty interesting read. I've got some stories of my own, but I just need somebody to write them, I think, for me. Maybe I'll give you a buzz. I'll send you what is it called? A recording of the stories that I've got to tell. That'd be awesome. Yeah, man, that's cool. One hell of a life. So what are your goals for the future right now? So we usually, the podcast usually takes about an hour. We're coming on the time. The last 2 or 5 minutes, I guess, were an abbreviated version of abbreviated, but a much more intense, much more denser version of the first 10 minutes that we missed of your voice at the beginning. What are some things, I guess, what are your goals for the future?
I just want to keep telling stories. I've got a whole bunch of books coming out. I'm hoping to make another couple of band book club books. We got one coming out soon about a friend of ours here in Ulsan, actually, that grew up in a cult and escaped with the help of banned books. And we're working on a second sequel that would then take a bunch of other stories from around the world. I'm hoping to do a lot more student ambassador books. The first one takes place in Korea, but I want to take this character all around the world. That's like a kids book series that kind of teaches about languages and culture and history through the lens of a fun, wacky adventure mystery comic. And I got lots of projects I want to keep making, and hopefully some of these TV deals will work out, and just keep making stuff and always be making something different.
Yeah, always moving forward, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Ryan, any last thoughts for people here who are struggling with, personal existence or, going through some crises, last words of wisdom to share?
Yeah, I say, I talked earlier about the Not My Jam challenge. Give that a try. Well, I mean, right now there's a lot of reasons you can't do things involving getting around other people. But pandemic aside, if you get the chance to go on stage and tell a story, go on a podcast and tell some stories, do some kind of creative work, try something that you've never done before, and it's going to get you out of any rut that you find yourself in.
There you go. Fantastic. Okay, Ryan, thank you very much. Thanks a lot for agreeing to come onto the podcast. Thanks for sharing your wonderful life with us, man. That's really great.
Thank you for having me.
If you are listening to us and you're interested in seeing Ryan's work, check out his latest book. The link to his website is posted below the video. You can follow up on his work. There's his book. It sounds like a lot of fun to read. Based on a true story, which I think I might pick it up myself because it sounds like a lot of interesting stuff. So check it out, and yeah, Thanks again, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Well, that's it for today. Let me switch to the cover. Unfortunately, as I said earlier, my camera is being wonky, and so I do not have a image of myself. So this is the image that is subscribe to the channel, make sure to hit the like on the video, despite the fact that the video itself, as you can see, is not as it should be. My face is missing, but maybe that's not such a big loss. Today was a very, very interesting podcast, I think. Ryan is a pretty interesting speaker, and he does a lot of cool stuff, a lot of interesting work. So if you're new here, if you're catching the end of this podcast, make sure to go back to the beginning, maybe skip the first 10 or 15 minutes or so, because unfortunately my stupid ass managed to tune out the volume on the guest speaker, which is very unfortunate. But basically what was said towards the end of it, that was Ryan's kind of summary of everything that was said during the first 10 minutes. And hopefully you'll be able to get that as well, most of it. Today is Monday the 27th, and it's the last week before our vacation here at Shane English. Next week, next Monday, I believe it's going to be a live podcast from somewhere. I have no idea. It could be a campsite, could be some other place. I don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be streaming through my cell phone, because that's the ability that I possess right now to stream podcasts on my cell phone. That's going to happen sometime in the form of a bush extravaganza. Until then, Monday is over. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the week, and don't work too hard. And we'll see you in the 75th episode of the Korea podcast next week, on next Monday, somewhere from a campground here in the southern parts of the South Korean peninsula. Good night, everyone. Yeah. Catch ya on the flip side, yo. Bye-bye.